Okay, I'm back. Well, that was kind of an awkward ending. I was almost finished this little section. I just needed another 20 seconds. Last time, where we left off is we were um, looking at how we can process the query results, right? And that the array that we get back from either remember how we could, you could use either um, fetch, or you can use a for each loop, but the row data that we get back can be accessed either using an index or has a key, which is kind of cool. They both access the same field value. Finally, our fifth step in our algorithm is actually pretty simple, right? Freeing the resources and closing the connections is just simply a matter of setting the PDO object to null. Why is this necessary? Eventually, when the page finishes executing, the PDO is going to be set to null kind of anyways. It's going to be garbage collected. However, garbage collection doesn't happen instantaneously. And connections are actually a really scarce result in most database management systems. You often only have 32 or 64 or 128 connections available, but you might have thousands of requests coming in. So what this means is one should try to use a connection, keep a connection used for as short a time as possible. So you can make your database management system happier by closing your connection, by setting it to null, as soon as you're finished with it. So I'd recommend always putting this into your code. So there's our basic connection algorithm again, right? We've looked at those 5 steps. Let's actually do something practical. So what I want you to do is I want you to write the code to generate the other options in this gallery. Oh, I see I have this, the wrong screen capture. I'm going to have to redo this. But the gallery here, the first option should say select a gallery. And then the idea is that when you click on this list here, you'll see a populated list that's been populated from a database table. Which database table, you might say? Well, it's this one. Let's assume we have a database, let's call it art, and that there's a table called galleries, and these are the field names. So you can see that each option element is going to contain the gallery name and then in brackets, the gallery city. I want you to write this code up. So ideally, you're going to pause this video, you're going to get out a piece of paper, and you're going to try to write this code up. So let's pretend you're off doing that. Well, I'm going to come back. Let's just assume 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later, you've written that code. Let's see whether you've got the same thing that I have. Okay. Well, we're going to have our require. Oh, by the way, require is the same as include. The difference is that require means that it has to be there. You can include a file that doesn't exist, and PHP will quite happily keep working. By setting it to require, PHP will give an error if it can't find it. Require once means make sure you only include this file the single time. Okay, so that has we're going to assume the connection string and the user and the password information is defined up here. You may remember that the set attribute is optional. It just gives us better error messages when it happens. Our code should be in a try-catch block. And then we're going to have this code here. There's actually something kind of wrong with what we've got here, with what I've got here, and I'm kind of hoping you can catch it. But at any rate, in our markup, eventually somewhere, we've got this select box, we've got an option that's already there, and then for all the other options, we're going to generate them programmatically. So that means we need an SQL statement. We're going to run the query. Here I used the while loop rather than the for each. And you can see here I'm generating option elements. Okay, so in the option element, I'm going to set the value to the gallery ID. Right, that closes that option. Then I'm going to output the gallery name and the gallery city and end the option. So I'm just going to generate one of those for each record I have. And then I'm going to set the PDO to null at the very end. Do you see what I've missed in this code? You're right. Hopefully you've said someone out there has probably found it. This code is PDO code. It should be inside of a try-catch. So this code here should also be in a try-catch. Why didn't I put that in? Well, partly because I wanted to ask this question of everyone, but also I was a little worried whether there was going to be enough space to fit it in. But as you can see, code can start getting a little messy once you have try-catches all over the place. And later on, we're going to look at a way to try to make our code feel cleaner using functions and so on, so we don't have this PDO code amongst our markup. That can get to be really messy code after a while. All right, so let's, that last example was pretty straightforward, but a lot of the times what we want to do when we're using PDO and databases is we want to construct our queries based on user input. So, for instance, right, this is what we had just done, right, where we selected a gallery and then, from a list. But what happens once we actually, select the gallery? Well, maybe what we want to have happen is maybe we want to display the paintings from that gallery. Well, look at this. It's a query string. And this is really, really common. A common form of user input is to make use of query string parameters. Query string parameters. Well, recall that query string parameters can come from generally two different places. They can come from a submitted form that uses method equals get, right? Or it can be a link with a URL that contains a query string. So here, right, here we've got a URL, process.php, but here's query string information, right? That's quite common. Interestingly, this and this result in the same URL, right? Both of these give the same result. Of course, one's a link and one's a form, but because the form here is using get and its action is the same as the URL here, both of these two things create the exact same request. So let's see if we can figure out how to do this. Here's our paintings table. You can see there's a bunch of fields. The one we're interested in is this foreign key gallery ID, which this select will return. Right, we saw that. Let's go jump back here. Remember here with the option value, right? The gallery ID is going to be the value of whatever the user selects. What we want to programmatically generate is this SQL right here. Right? Select the title, the gallery ID, and the image file name from. Darn it. That's an error. All right, let's just change this on the fly. There we go. It's supposed to be from paintings, not galleries, right? Paintings. From paintings where the gallery ID equals 17. Why 17? Well, that's what was given to us in the query string. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. Well, anytime we work with query strings, remember query strings are user data. User data might not be there, so we have to use isSet. And again, we're going to be making use of $_get to get at that information. So here we're just checking to make sure it exists and it's not 0. And if it does exist, then we're going to programmatically generate an SQL statement using that value. So what is this SQL variable going to be equal to after executing this line of code, right? It's going to be equal to this. Select star from paintings where gallery ID equals 17. Why 17? Because that's what gallery was equal to. Well, as you can see here, there's a little note, and it says, while this works, there is a major security risk here, something called an SQL injection attack, which we'll look at in a future video. And so we'll look at the solution to this shortly. Okay, but regardless of that, after we programmatically generate our SQL, we'll just run the query and we'll just loop through our results. And we don't need to look at the output for outputting each of these boxes. We can just imagine what that might look like. Maybe we'll have created a function here called output painting, and we're going to pass it the row, and it'll do that. And voila, that's what we get. In fact, as you can see from the URL, this is in Lab 14. It's exercise 8. So you'll get a chance to, if you do the lab, you'll get a chance to do this as well. And I think that's where I'm going to leave off. That's all I've got for today. This took me all day. Oh my goodness, this is a lot of work. It's certainly a lot easier just to show up into the lecture hall, pick up a piece of chalk and just write on the chalkboard. But I guess this is going to be my life now for, for the next several weeks for both of my classes. All right, anyways, that's it for today. Bye-bye.